Good morning. Once again, welcome to the Temple Buddhist Center. In this particular practice, the practice of the Dharma, practice of mindfulness, we often talk about the importance of equanimity. Equanimity means that we accept, allow, remain open to our present moment experience. Whatever we're thinking, feeling, sensing, seeing, hearing, we simply let that be. We don't try to manipulate our internal experience. We simply receive it. Now, it's important to remember that this particular teaching applies to our internal experiences. In the world around us, we can accept, allow, receive what we see, what we hear. But there's also times when we need to take action. If we're cold, we can notice the cold. We can experience the cold, what it feels like in the body, on the skin. Noticing our mental and emotional reactions to the feeling of being cold or hot or whatever. And at the same time, we can put on a jacket or we can turn up the heat or whatever we need to do to mitigate that experience. So equanimity doesn't mean passivity in the world. Equanimity simply means that we allow our internal experience to be what it is. And I'm often asked the question, given that teaching of equanimity, how do I know when and how I should act in the world? What criteria do I use to take action when I need to? In regard to whatever, changing jobs or changing a relationship or confronting someone or getting involved in a social or political situation or whatever it may be. How do I know what to do? What do I have to guide my actions? Equanimity internally is fine, but what do I do externally? So that's what we're going to talk about this morning. So my response to the question of how do I know what to do? How do I know what's the best thing to do? Is to respond to that question with another question, which I often do. Some of my former students are here. They know well. And the question is, why do you want to act? Not what to do or how to act, but why? What mind state, what internal state is generating the desire to act? So the first question to ask is, am I wanting to act from some form of suffering? Am I wanting to act from fear, from anger, from resentment, from vindictiveness, or from guilt, or whatever? Am I acting as a way of avoiding something, feeling something inside of me? That's what we don't want to do. We want to first turn within and notice our internal experience. And if there's a desire to act, to examine that internal experience and question, why do I want to do this? What mind state is generating the desire to act? Can I experience my feelings fully before I act? Then, when I act, I'm not acting from suffering, from anger, from fear, from guilt. I'm not reacting. I can then respond from clear intentionality. So am I living my life intentionally, or am I living my life reactively? That's really the key question. And in order to live our life intentionally, it's important that we are able to be present to our inner experiences and to make peace with them before we act. So that my action is coming from clarity and from intentionality. Now, this is not to say that the problem, if there is one, seems to be all ours. Other people may be acting unconsciously and unintentionally, maybe acting out of suffering or even the intention to create suffering for others. When we see that happening, it's often easy to respond in like kind, to respond the way we see someone else acting or reacting. But we are always responsible for our response to our life. No matter what someone does or doesn't do to us, no matter what the conditions of our life, we're not necessarily responsible for the conditions of our life. Sometimes we are, sometimes we aren't. We're not necessarily responsible for our feelings. Feelings emerge automatically. Boom. Here they are. But we are responsible for how we respond to those feelings. We are responsible for how we respond to what someone else says, does to us. So I cannot control what others are doing. I cannot even control what I'm doing sometimes. But I can be responsible for how I see it and what I choose to do with that experience. If I'm acting out of resistance to something I'm feeling rather than acting out of a clear mind and open heart with clear intentionality, then there's a good chance that I'm going to create more suffering for myself and for others. If I lash out or strike out at someone instinctively, someone that hurts me in some way, or violates me or whatever, if I respond automatically out of anger, then that response is going to generate another response, which generates another response, and that's what we call human history. Just one reaction after another. That's what the Buddhists call samsara, the wheel of suffering. one unconscious act leads to another unconscious act, which leads to another one, and another one, and another one, and it's like a snowball rolling down a hill. So the first thing to do is to be present to our experiences, and to not act out of anger doesn't mean that we suppress our anger or our fear. Equanimity is not repression or suppression. Equanimity is not denying our feelings or our conditions. Equanimity is not denying anything. It's accepting everything, but it's not reacting to it. And sometimes in the face of what appears to be great injustices, we can get caught up in a story about how terrible it is, and we get reactive. On the other hand, we can repress our anger and say, oh, well, I shouldn't be reacting. I should be a good Buddhist or Christian or whatever, and push those feelings down. And as you know, that doesn't work either. So there's a very powerful skill in being able to hold our experience without repressing it, without acting it out. Someone asked Mohandas Gandhi, he was a Western reporter, I believe it was. Asked Gandhi, he says, you know, in the face of all the injustices to your people, to the Indian people, how do you keep from getting angry? And Gandhi looked at him very fiercely, and he says, who said I don't get angry? He says, I get very angry. And then this is what he said. I have learned through bitter experience the one supreme lesson to conserve my anger. And as heat is conserved and transmuted into energy, even so our anger, controlled, can be transformed into a power that can move the world. So conserving anger or fear or whatever it is that we're feeling doesn't mean holding on to resentments or guilt, but it means being present to it, incorporating, integrating that experience into your life, and letting it be a teacher. Fear and anger get bad press in spiritual circles. Fear and anger and so-called negative emotions are seen as a sin or a mistake or a failing. But it wasn't for fear and if it wasn't for fear and anger, the human race would not survive, nor would any other species survive, because fear and anger is part of our survival mechanism. It's instinctive. It's as deep as the desire to breathe. So it's not about trying to get rid of fear or anger or repress it, because there can be a certain wisdom. But the wisdom is not in acting it out, it's in holding it and learning from it. So before we act, we can ask, do I want to perpetuate suffering? Or do I want to dissolve it? let my actions be for the purpose of dissolving suffering rather than perpetuating it. I have found oftentimes when I do that, action is not even necessary. So much of the time, number one, what seems to be a problem often isn't. The problem is in here. And number two, the problem somehow seems to unravel itself when I don't try to muck it up. And there are times when I do need to act. So if you clear the mind and the heart, and you find that intentional action is needed, then act boldly. Put your heart into what you're acting, what you're doing. Act boldly, and then release all attachment to results. That's not easy. Because if we act with attachment to results, then we're sowing the seeds for more suffering, either for ourselves and or for others. Let your actions be clear, conscious, and intentional, and then let go of the results, of any attachment to the results. Notice how you feel when you take action, whenever you do what you're doing. Does it feel clear? Does it feel right inside yourself? And as we do that as individuals, oftentimes we may find others who are functioning in that same way. Gandhi called that satyagraha, the power of truth. That truth itself, if it's what motivates us, is the desire for truth, the desire for true justice, for love, that's very powerful, both personally and collectively. When we act from love, when I say love, I don't mean being nice necessarily. And I don't mean trying to fix things. But I mean love in the sense of love of the truth. Love of what's right. When we act from love without attachment to results, that's very powerful. And many enduring changes throughout history have come from individuals acting that way. You know, the Buddha, Jesus of Nazareth, Gandhi. In our own time, Nelson Mandela, Desmond Tutu in South Africa, Martin Luther King, many, many others, you see. The power of their words and their actions come not from anger and not from repressing their anger, but from conserving that anger, transmuting it into love, and then taking action. So we can try it out in our own life. We can try it out in the world. I invite you to join me in this commitment to conscious, mindful living. And from that we say, may peace, may truth, may love prevail on this planet. Thank you.